Welcome to the Ricky Matthews Show from the Citizens Bank Studio. Hope you're having a great day as we continue to celebrate people across the great state of Mississippi who are working so hard in the trenches to make this such a great place to live, work, and play. Hey, listen, in the second half of the show, we're going to have a conversation and talk a little bit about maybe a different way to view addiction and efforts to work on helping people who have addiction. I think you'll enjoy that part of the conversation and maybe rethink how you think about it. In the first part, we're going to be talking with Scott Waller, the president and CEO of the Mississippi Economic Council, and we're going to get up to date on some really important strategic initiatives that they're doing. I wanted to mention, too, that I've gotten a lot of feedback on a column I wrote recently about the need to rethink how we raise the bar in coastal Mississippi from an economic development point of view. I've had breakfast with people. I've got lunches coming up. Leaders all across coastal Mississippi are engaged in this this conversation, and I've pointed out many times with each of them that I'm not necessarily saying we need to stop doing the work that we're doing in each of the counties from an economic development point of view. The land management work that they're doing, utility management work that they're doing, the focus on their county work that they're doing is also extraordinarily important. But I just think we've got to raise the bar from a regional economic development point of view and think about ways to raise the bar so that in these important conversations that are happening across our state, you're hearing billions of dollars of investment in Mississippi, that we're in those conversations, that we force our way into those conversations in a way that makes us relevant to those conversations. I just don't think we're raising the bar high enough. And I will continue to say that. Until the cows come home. So thanks for the feedback. I really appreciate it. If you missed that column, you can go to supertalk.fm, look under the opinion section, and go look at it, this vision for coastal Mississippi. We'll continue those important conversations. Okay, now let's shift gears and move over to Scott Waller, the president and CEO of the Mississippi Economic Council, and someone I really enjoy having on this show because he's got his ear close to the ground on lots of things, but they're involved in a really, really important strategic effort now to make it so that his organizations and others, for that matter, are focused on the business community in Mississippi in maybe a different, more responsive way. And we'll see more about that here shortly. Anyway, Scott, how you been, my friend?
Doing great. It's good to see you.
So we're pre-recording this, so people need to know that. So this is when we could get together and. So it's hard to talk about the legislature because we're literally at that moment where the rubber is hitting the road. In fact, by the time this airs, lots of decisions will have been made. But it's amazing as we have said the last couple of years, the important big conversations we're having in this state about the future of this state. This is a good thing to observe, isn't it?
You know, it really is, and whether it's from the business community's perspective of how we are focusing our attention on what we need to really be driving our state forward. You know, MEC every year does a tour across the state. We'll be down on the coast with all three counties here, I think, in about a month. Looking forward to, of course, getting back to the coast. But what we're talking about is how do we enhance the vision that we have already? What MEC did in 2022 with our Securing Mississippi's Future Vision for Economic Growth effort was really an amazing step forward to kind of continuing the Blueprint Mississippi initiatives that we had done in the past. But you can't just sit back and say, well, this is it. We had success here. Let's be happy. We've got to constantly be enhancing that vision. So as we look at doing that, and particularly with things that are happening in the legislature right now with how it relates to what we need to be doing in terms of infrastructure, having a really fair and competitive tax structure, all of those things are part of that equation. But at the end of the day, if we're not creating new opportunities for all Mississippians, we really aren't doing our job. And that's what this is about. How do we grow the economy? You know, how do we utilize the advantages that the Mississippi Gulf Coast has, for example? How do we utilize advantages of other parts of the state in a way that we're all pulling in the same direction? And I think that's ultimately what we're trying to do and try to focus on every day that I come to the office and try to figure out the best way to represent the members of MEC.
So as you look toward the future, as you start to implement all the possibilities, where do you see the future in terms of these strategic goals?
Well, I think it's twofold. I think there's the goals organizationally, which I want to talk a little bit about where we are with that. You may recall back in October, we released an announcement that we were in the middle of what we call in our Business Alignment 2026 project. And that project is really looking at, there are three major organizations that deal with business issues, and two of us are fairly large organizations that share a lot of the same members. And as a result of that, what we were trying to do is make sure that we are focusing on how we serve those members best, because ultimately, if we're doing that, that's going to help drive our state's economy. So it's MEC, which is the State Chamber of Commerce. We're the private nonprofit state chamber. A lot of people get confused with our name, thinking we're a state agency. We're not. We are a private entity that represents businesses. I always talk about, we do not take any state or federal dollars for MEC. We're directed by the businesses that support us. The Mississippi Manufacturing Association, it's kind of in the same situation. It's a member-based organization that represents manufacturing. And then the third organization is the Mississippi Business and Industry Political Education Committee, which is a political involvement committee called BIPEC, which is a big part of what business associations do. In 29 states across the country, those organizations are combined. And Mississippi is one of the few that has not only separate organizations, but two strong separate organizations as it relates to the state chamber and the manufacturing group. Fortunately, right now, we have tremendous leadership at the other two organizations who understand the same thing that I'm have been talking to the MEC board about for a number of years, is we're diluting resources in some ways. So how do we do a better job of bringing those resources together, and how we do a better job of representing those businesses? And at the end of the day, we know that for us to really be successful and do all the things that we need to be doing, we need the resources to do that. I think MEC has a tremendous track record and has done some great things. MMA has a tremendous track record and has done some great things. BIPEC does a great job of making sure we got the candidates that are focused on making sure we're moving our business community forward and supporting those. Together, I think we can do some tremendously great things. And that's why when we talk about the future as it relates to our organization and where we want to be, that was the purpose behind sitting down and looking at it. And the paid leadership, that's myself, John McKay, who is president and CEO of Mississippi Manufacturing Association, and Derek Easley, who is president and CEO of the BIPEC organization. We understand that. And I think when you have three leaders that are on the same page, and we all are willing to put our egos aside and figure out what is the best thing for our members, what is the best thing for the organization, and what is the best thing for the state, that's when you really make a difference. And I'll tell you, we were fortunate enough, we've got some counterparts around the country that allowed us to bring a small working group into their organization, their buildings. And we were up in Wisconsin visiting with that organization, which is kind of a model that we think is, they did the same thing just many years ago. They combined a lot of these groups together. And I saw one of their key leaders about 2 weeks later in a meeting, and he said, I was amazed. He said, you have three people who are running organizations sitting at a table all on the same page about what's best for their members and not what's best for them. And I think that's the type of leadership that I've seen out of John and Derek. And that just excites me about the future of what this organization can be once it's brought together.
Well, listen, I mean, what you said is extremely unusual. It is extremely unusual. It is normal for people to resist change. It's normal for people to protect their turf. And all the merger and acquisition work that I was involved in as a CEO, it was hard. It was hard work executing, bringing organizations together. I don't care if you're talking about a nonprofit or a corporation, because at the end of the day, you're talking about an organization that involves people, and it's hard, and there can be resistance and all of that. Why isn't that the case? Why aren't people working overtime to preserve their turfs and their positions, so on? I mean, Do you have to just accommodate for that in the transition? How does that work?
I think there will be some things that we'll have to talk about and figure out how to work through. I'll tell you, I think part of it is the approach that we're taking is this isn't just a, hey, we're going to do this. We took the approach with the business alignment project that we're exploring this option, but we're going to do it in a very systematic way. And that's why it's called Business Alignment 2026 and not Business Alignment Now, is that we wanted to make sure that we're doing all the things the right way. And it's a step process. We have reached the first milestone. The first milestone was to be able to go out into the communities across the state and listen to what our members were saying from all three organizations. And I think that was the biggest part of what made this successful, is that when they understood what we were doing and they realized what was happening, it was truly, hey, this can work if we just talk about the few issues we're going to need to work through and then move forward.
We'll pick it up right there with President and CEO of the Mississippi Economic Council, Scott Waller, when we come back from break. We'll see you after this. Welcome back to the Ricky Matthews Show. We're visiting with Scott Waller from right here at the Citizens Bank studio, the president and CEO of the Mississippi Economic Council. And when we went to break, we were talking about bringing the Mississippi Manufacturers Association, the Mississippi Economic Council, and BIPAC, which is essentially like a political action committee for the business community, bringing them together into one organization. And when we went to break, we were just talking about how so many of your members are part of each of these organizations, and it just makes sense. On the surface, it makes so much sense to think that we're going to streamline and not just streamline, but also make effective so much of what we do by getting everyone on the same page within potentially one organization. And Scott, one of the things that reminded me of when we were in the process after Hurricane Katrina of creating the Night Center that we have here in coastal Mississippi, it was a great effort. I had the pleasure at the time of being chairman of the local Night Foundation, and we worked really hard to pull that out. Of course, with Harrah's help, we were able to get the building, and one thing led to another. But one thing that became very clear, in fact, I went up to Princeton during that time and visited with the Robert Woods Johnson Foundation to see kind of a similar approach to it. But when you see it, like your visit to Wisconsin, to see what they had did relative to your effort, when you see it with your own eyes, you really begin to see, gosh, this is going to be great for the community, a common place, and in our case with the Night Center, for community leaders to meet. People who might be on the board for United Way are also on the board for the Coast Chamber. They're all going to be in the same building, so that there's going to be tremendous economies of scale around that. We were able to really begin to see, man, this is going to be good for the nonprofit community, because so many of us served on all those different boards. That's different than this case, but some of the outcome was similar to this case. That is trying to keep the focus of your leadership, the people, the volunteer leadership who are involved, trying to make their involvement in conversations around the business community very streamlined and very focused. And I can't see any reason why this won't work with screaming success, as long as you implement it in a way that that everyone understands and can be focused around.
Well, that's the key, to do it the right way. And I think that's part of the reason, as I said earlier, we set out for this to really be a deliberate process of how we wanted to do it. And with specific timelines and milestones that we wanted to reach. I mentioned we did that first milestone where we've gone out and we've listened. And I will tell you that the response and the feedback has been tremendous. I mean, overwhelmingly, members of all three organizations feel very comfortable that this is something that we need to really look at trying to bring together. It's going to get tougher as we go forward. We realize that. We're in the process now of looking internally at it, what each organization does, how it's structured, how it looks, how it come together. I mean, you're dealing with three organizations that have all three have different fiscal years, all three have different budgets, approaches, all of those things. So we got to figure out how to do that. The ask for our members is fairly simple. The ask is, look, continue to support the new organization at the same level you used to support the three. So in other words, give us the resources necessary. The cost savings to the members will be the return on investment of what they're continuing to make. That they'll get the organization will run more effectively. It will have a much powerful voice. We'll be able to really kind of focus on those things. And honestly, the couple of days after the announcement was made, we held our Hobnob Mississippi event, and Speaker White even brought up the fact that this is what can help the legislature understand from a single voice what are the important things for the business community. So we're excited about the potential. We believe it is the right thing to do. We believe the timing is right. I believe personally that the leadership of the two gentlemen that are at the other organization are much younger than I am, and have the potential to really, over the next few years, build this into something very, very special that's going to help grow our state in ways we haven't seen before.
So if I'm still a CEO at the Sun Herald, for example, trying to get my head around this, you mentioned what the return on investment will be, and the return on investment will be what you said it is, and that is having an aligned, focused organization doing what Speaker White says, making it much clearer about what the direction of the business community is strategically in terms of legislation and otherwise. But the other benefit I would see immediately would be, especially if I serve on two of the three boards, is that the time commitment that I'm putting into it now is going to be cut in half. I like that. That's a real benefit.
And that was one of the discussions we had. We also did a site visit to our good friend next door in Arkansas. Randy Zook's been the CEO there for a number of years. It was kind enough to host us. And we spent a lot of time talking about the availability of resources as it related to the talent, and meaning that the CEOs of our companies that have to serve on so many different boards and have to serve in so many different places, that we really need to utilize their expertise and not overtax them in the amount of time that they have to spend. And I think that's a big part of this as well, is the volunteer leadership that all of us have to depend on becomes so much stronger and so much more focused on the issue, because they may not they won't go to an MEC board meeting in January and turn around and go to a MMA board meeting in February or whatever the case may be. It's okay. Now we're focusing whatever the new organization will be called, and making a difference that way.
Listen, when in my professional life, I was involved in strategic planning at the corporate level for a couple of different corporations, and so I've been there leading very significant organizational change efforts. And I think what you've done is smart. I mean, first of all, you said, okay, what's our current situation? You've developed that understanding. Then you said, okay, what are the best practices that are out there? And let's go look at that. So we have a sense of what we want to become, but let's go look at what other successful organizations have done this as well. Let's go see what they've done. And then let's embody those learnings into this vision that's evolving for what we're doing. So you know where you are now, and you know where you want to go, and you know that it's going to be a better place. The hard work is implementing, but if you're smart about it, and it may be a multi-year thing. It may not be something that you arrive at all the various tasks that you have to accomplish in the year one. It may be a 2 or 3 year process. But the goal is to map it out, to say, okay, here's where we need to be on each of these elements by these dates, and we're going to get it done. The interesting thing about this, though, having led nonprofits as well, is that you got a lot of understanding about what you need to do. You'll probably be able to accomplish most of what you need to accomplish on the implementation day. But there'll still be some open items.
There'll still be something. Yeah.
So I think you've been smart about this.
Well, and again, to your point, I think we want to benchmark other organizations, but we also have to realize that we have among my counterparts across the country, we have a saying: if you've seen one state chamber, you've seen one state chamber. We're all different. We all have our unique things that we do, but we need to benchmark. And we're looking. We made the site visits. We're benchmarking probably another eight or so organizations across the country that either have tremendous leadership or have some of the things that we think this organization could be successful at. So at the end of the day, we won't be putting something that says, oh, this is just like that state. We want to take the best of these states. And fortunately, both mine and John's counterparts are very happy to help in this process. And that's really, we joke about when we go to our national associations meetings that those meetings are really designed as R&D sessions, rip off and duplicate. So that's what we do is we try to make sure that we're, looking at best practices across the country and building an organization that's going to be successful.
There are really, at the end of the day, probably there are no new ideas. Now there may be some unique and innovative approaches to how you bring ideas that have already been implemented before, how they apply in Mississippi. So what ends up shaping for Mississippi is something that is certainly unique to Mississippi, but in a lot of ways maybe feels a lot similar to what's happening in places like Arkansas and Wisconsin and the other places that you're looking. And there's so many pockets of excellence. And as long as you're focused on discovering those and implementing those here, we'll be successful. And I say we because, look, it is extremely important for the MEC and Mississippi Manufacturers Association especially, and then whatever the political action element of this is, to be successful. We need Mississippi, the fastest way to overcome our problems in this state is through economic development. We both know that. That's going to help education. That's going to help workforce. That's going to raise average pay across this state. It's going to improve quality of life. It's going to make Mississippi competitive on the most important stages that we will face going forward. We have to have a strong state chamber, whatever you ultimately call it, whatever that organization is that represents business and industry, has to be strong. Without it, we're not going to reach our potential. I mean, you really believe that too, don't you?
Oh, I truly do. I think that's what drives it. I mean, when look, we want to continue to grow the economy. We want to attract new businesses, but at the end of the day, Enrique, you understand this, we also have to be doing things to make our existing businesses be successful and continue to grow. So that's really the biggest part of all this, is having that organization that's focusing on those things.
Yeah, no doubt about it. Scott Waller, the president and CEO of Mississippi Economic Council, excuse me. Thanks for joining me today. This has been a terrific conversation.
Thank you for having me, Ricky. It's always good to see you.
Look forward to more conversations as you guys get ready to start implementing some of these ideas. Listen, when we come back, we'll continue a wonderful, important conversation about addiction. We'll see you after this.